Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Geomologist Presents. I have a special treat for y'all today. I have Joshua Harper and Stuart Wilding. Sorry, I'll cut all that out. I'll start again. Sorry about that. I said Wilding. I thought Wildling.
Yeah, my wife does the same thing, especially after Game of Thrones. Ooh, Wildling.
Wildling. Wow, that's pretty cool. All right.
Carl Rodriguez is the GMologist, GM extraordinaire, the GMologist.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Geomologist Presents. I have a great treat for you today. I have authors Joshua Harper and Stuart Wilding from Storeywood Games. How are you guys doing today?
Hey, Carl. I'm doing great.
Yeah, doing fantastic. Thanks for having us on, Carl.
Yeah, it's fantastic to have you guys, to have met you guys. We've met a couple times at Dragon's Lair in San Antonio at the medical center, where you guys are running some Storeywood games. What are you guys running right now?
Right now, my big thing that I run a lot of is a game called 1886. It's like a Western cowboy game, kind of historical take on the West, and it uses cards to adjudicate outcomes instead of dice. So that's what I run a lot of right now.
Is that a Storeywood Games or going to be a Storeywood Games product?
Mm-hmm.
That's your own creation, right?
Yep, it's currently in play testing right now, and it is planned for the future. But it's a ton of fun. That's what I run a lot of right now.
Cool. And Stuart?
And I have almost exclusively been running Hunters of the Occult, which is going to be our upcoming project in Storeywood Games, a tabletop RPG, Victorian era monster hunting. If you've ever seen that 2000s movie with Hugh Jackman, Van Helsing, heavy inspiration for this game. So things like Van Helsing, The Witcher, Bloodborne. Player characters are assuming the roles of career monster hunters, mercenary monster hunter slayers, and they travel across the world just killing vampires, werewolves, zombies, demons, all that good stuff.
Well, that's cool. So you guys are actually more or less in the heart of playtesting products that you're making for the company, for Storeywood. So how did you first get into RPGs, though? We'll get into these games, and I think we definitely want to talk about them at length here later. But how did you get into RPGs? What's your like RPG origin story?
Sure. I can go first, Josh. So, really, like most people, I imagine, at some point I was introduced to Dungeons and Dragons first. I need to put $1 in the D&D jar. Anyway, that'll come up a lot. Friends of mine, when we were, this is a while ago, when we were in college, played pretty casually, and we did some extremely pretty unorganized is the term I'll use. I was instantly grabbed by the tabletop RPG format. I mean, the open-ended freedom for characters to do like anything they can think of is such a breath of fresh air compared to, say, video games, board games, that sort of thing. And so naturally, my only exposure to the RPG world, at least for a while, was D&D. And eventually, though, I did start to come out of my shell, venture out into other things, thanks to several of my friends in the RPG community. Tried a number of different games, especially powered by the apocalypse stuff. World of Darkness, for example, was one I tried pretty early on. And of course, seeing the different takes on the tabletop RPG genre gave me a lot of perspective on what I liked, what I didn't like, and has helped inform me what I do now. And I'm sure that's not dissimilar from what a lot of other people experience as well.
Cool. So would you say that you prefer, are you now more delving into these kind of like more, I guess a term is story games or more narrative minded games? Is that kind of what inspires you right now?
Yeah. I've been trying to digest as much as I possibly can, especially thanks to actually Josh here and some other friends of ours who had really gotten me into the Power by the Apocalypse engine stuff and trying out the more narrative focused games. That has become a little passion of mine as of the last couple of years, and it's certainly a very different take on tabletop games compared to your typical D&D, right? And it's really cool to see how the game can be taken in such a different direction just with that mindset change.
Cool. And how about you, Josh? It's Josh, right, or Joshua? What do you prefer? Sorry.
You can call me whatever is easier for you. Whatever comes out
Okay.
of your mouth is fine with me. So I started for me it started with board games. I grew up playing a lot of
Huh.
board games. So like I remember like a long time ago, like the first board game I ever played was this British board game called Cop It that my mom, who's from England, like she had with her, and I brought it like that. I played that game a bunch, and then that eventually led to me getting plugged into some more local gaming stuff. A local gaming group that I joined through my youth pastor. It's called Love Thy Nerd, and they're a cool group, awesome people, and they had these kind of regional gaming meetups that we were doing for the Texas area, and I would go with like I said, my like youth pastor Ryan, and he would take us to go play in these games in this little organization. And eventually Ryan was like, hey, you should come play D&D with us. And so I played some D&D with him for a while, and it was a ton of fun. I had a character called Finnegan Falkfire, and I try to get him to appear in everything I can now.
What's the name of that character?
Finnegan Falkfire. It might have even been a D&D random generated name.
That's funny.
But I liked it a lot. And yeah, and that was it. So I got into D&D, played that for a little bit with Ryan, and then I stopped playing for a long time. And a mutual friend of mine and Stuart's by the name of Aaron, he started playing a game called Dungeon World, and that led to me trying to find a game to play that was powered by the apocalypse. I ended up playing with a guy called Chris Koger. He's from Spooky Bill Games. They also have a Kickstarter coming out in August. Him and Wes Ascalese, they're having another Kickstarter. Their Kickstarter coming out. It's called Beyond Deep. If you want to check it out. But
I'll
he
put it
was
in the show notes.
Yeah, for sure. But Chris, he was a great DM. He really was like the first long form campaign, and it was a ton of fun just going through playing a cyberpunk setting in the sprawl, and it blew my mind what you could do with RPGs, going from D&D to Powered by the Apocalypse. So ever since then, I've been just playing all sorts of narrative games.
Cool. So Storywood Games, let me kind of try to introduce Storywood Games as best I can, and I'm sure you all will correct me. So the Storywood Games, you might know, listeners, that they've done a couple Kickstarters for Mork Borg. They created an adventure that's called Psalm 4 1, and then they've done a second Kickstarter doing these sort of pamphlet-sized, 3 pamphlet-sized adventures, also for Mork Borg. So how did you get involved in Storywood Games? Tell me about Storywood. This is kind of we all play, and some of us are fortunate to have the discipline enough to transition to become authors and be involved with a gaming company. So I guess tell me about Storywood. Is that accurate? Is there more Storywood that I don't know about? Because that's where I met you, is playing in one of these adventures, actually.
Yeah.
Run by your I guess one of your partners, right, in the company.
Yeah, Scott, and yeah, he's
Scott
awesome.
Andrew. Scott Andrew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he and I we met playing Star Wars Destiny, a Fantasy Flight game that has since died out, and I wanted to do a Kickstarter for something at the time, and I was like, oh, I should connect with someone who I know who does production stuff. And Scott, I knew had done, he had produced some music stuff. He had run like a music label. So I was like, I should go with him. I bet he would know how to do that, and we could run a Kickstarter together. And, we were like, just started talking, and he and his brother Byron had been talking about starting a board game company. I was like, we should get together and start working on a board game company. And then we started with Psalms 4-1, and we did another one, Junction City, after that.
Right,
and that's
Junction City. Yeah, we should talk about that too. That's a pretty cool game as well.
Yep, the Junction City. Then we did the Holy Artifacts of the Sacred Tragedies, and now we're on to our fourth one, or I guess our fifth one now, fourth or fifth, one of the two. I can't remember, but yeah. And Stuart, how did you get involved?
Well, I've been playing sort of casual games with Josh and some other of our friends here for a couple of years now, and it wasn't anything serious. Just meet up every once in a while and play some board games. And I think somewhere along the way, Josh and I had kind of traded our passion for design and game creation, and had basically just opened a dialogue about the different projects that we were working on, starting with 1886, actually, if I recall the history right.
Mhm.
And that kind of evolved from there to talk about the things that I was working on, just as kind of like personal pet projects. And at a certain point, we were looking at the schedule basically for Storywood games for this year, and talking about the kinds of things that were on deck to be pushed out, and the things that we wanted to try to spend some time working on. And Josh had asked if I wanted to take the Hunters of the Occult project that I had been kind of fiddling around with a bit more seriously and turn it into an actual Kickstarter, actual published book. And I said, hell yeah, let's do this. And so we've been working on that for the past several months, going on Kickstarter here, I believe in August. If that's wrong, you can correct me, Josh.
No, that's
And
August 1st.
and this is this collaboration, myself as the author, and then working with Storywood for everything else, is really my first introduction to the Storywood team, and it's been fantastic so far.
That's really cool. So actually, I'll put the link in the show notes because you can already be notified upon launch for the Hunters of the Occult game. So, which is pretty cool. I think I'm following one or both of you on Instagram, or Storywood Games on Instagram, or one of the social media platforms that I got a notice already for Kickstarter to notify on launch. That's pretty cool. I'll put that in the show notes. So let's talk about this project, Stuart, or Josh. You want to talk about your project first? But I guess before we jump into that, I guess I do have a question that kind of came to my mind. So Storywood is not, I guess, since my introduction to Storywood was with Mork Borg, the cool thing I think is that they're not exclusively Mork Borg, right? Are you going to planning on doing more, or are you done, or is that sort of Scott's thing, is designing Mork Borg, and you guys have more freedom to do your own, or is that not? Am I totally off on how things work, and there's a different way or different thought process on how you guys already said you have a schedule, which I think is great. It seems very organized, and it's kind of neat that you said that Scott Andrew came from like music production, music business, so that maybe that makes it a bit more organized. I don't know, but yeah, but to kind of tell me a bit about that. I think is it about the different games that are coming out. It's not exclusively Mork Borg. Clearly, how does that design process, scheduling process work? I think it's pretty interesting.
So we really just try to make stuff that is cool that we like to play. So right now it's a lot of Mork Borg, obviously, because it's fun to make. It kind of is a fun, streamlined game. It's a blast to play. It's super easy to introduce people to, so it's fun to get them to play. It's super good for one shots. So we're just having a ton of fun with that. But we have two big systems. Hunters of the Occult coming August 1st, like I said, and then we also have 1886 coming next year. We got other projects planned in between. We're just trying to keep stuff organized, like you said.
Well, cool. So Stuart, let's talk about your new project. I know you're very excited about it. Yeah, it's very fun to play in we didn't get to play a full adventure, but I got to do a demo. I really liked it. From my point of view, before you start talking about it, I like it because it seems like it's going to focus on the narrative aspect and the investigative aspect, which has a lot of appeal to people. But then there are also people, especially people who have played your Mork Borg games, who are interested in the combat, right? And I think the combat, to me, had a lot of interesting things that you could do in combat, which kind of could bring in those types of players.
Oh yeah, so there's a lot of cool stuff that we like about Hunters of the Occult. I'll probably back up and rehash kind of the premise of what's going on here. So again, tabletop RPG set in Victorian era, where the players are career monster hunters who go around trying to hunt as many monsters as possible. The general idea is that you go into an area and you're maybe trying to figure out what the monster at hand is. Maybe the monster was inside you all along, and you will do your best to try to resolve the situations, make yourself famous, and therefore more skilled in the process, building up your reputations even as you go along, trying to stave off death and insanity throughout the process. So I guess I'll start a little bit with where this project came from, because I think that's helped inform the existing design here. So this was originally just a pet project of mine, something strictly for fun, which I've done plenty of times throughout the years at this point. And that kind of setting, the Hugh Jackman's Van Helsing type setting, is criminally underutilized in my opinion. It's true there are a handful of games that kind of flirt with the idea, but very, very few come close to really replicating that monster hunting feeling, I think, especially in that era. So I did what I always do, which is to try to figure out how I could make that happen myself and recreate that Van Helsing type feeling. And that's how Hunters of the Occult began, just trying to capture that setting strictly just with my immediate friends. And there's also something else you should probably know, especially about my friends, which is that a lot of them are complete and utter noobs to tabletop games. And so really the only way to make the system palatable and digestible, thinking of them as the audience, at least at the time, was to keep most of the mechanics pretty low to the ground and easy for really anyone to just pick up and do. Actually, Carl, you had sat with us in the demo, and it took all of a couple minutes to get all the mechanics down, and it's pretty straightforward. So I mean, one of my favorite things about it is that if you're new to games, you can just walk in, learn the rules in a couple of minutes, and then learn some of the nuance along the way. As kind of a reinforcement of that idea, the entire engine runs on a single D6 if you absolutely needed it to. I really, if you were so inclined, you could pass around the same one die from person to person, but maybe one per person is recommended. And so that's kind of the base premise of what we're working on here. But there's a lot of cool stuff going on with the game, which I'm happy to brag about, and we're pretty proud of, I think, as a creative group. So first and foremost, this is my personal favorite. We thought it was pretty important for monster hunters to express themselves via that monster hunting, and the way to do that is with customized weapons. So we have a completely created from scratch system where each character upon creation is going to formulate some weapon of their own design with modifications and therefore bonuses and strengths that will help inform what that monster hunter does in combat, even outside of combat in some cases. And the players throughout their careers are free to work on whatever unique creations they can imagine, given the kind of sandbox we've given them with those custom weapons. I've gotten great feedback just on that alone, even just in early testing, and very proud of it so far. And you had actually touched on this second point that I also have very much enjoyed, which is the combat feeling tactical and purposeful and even tense at times. For a bit of extra detail there, we use a pretty basic action point economy system. So for those unfamiliar, you get so many points per turn, and any actions that you perform cost a certain number of those points. And I think an action point system was the right call to try to present players with interesting or at least difficult decisions every turn, rather than your traditional move and act that I think a lot of us are familiar with. And yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to interject here. It's fantastic stuff, Stuart. But yeah, I agree. I mean, that is kind of, I thought was cool. Very simple system, easy to understand. And then, like you said, a lot of nuance because of the tactical choices that you can take in combat. I think that's definitely a strong selling point for this game.
Yeah, and actually, as I was doing research into action point systems, I have to admit, I'm fairly surprised it's not done more often, but hey, I'm doing my part, trying to get the word out there. Action points are cool. Anyway, one of the other things that we're pretty happy with in terms of the overall design is that we have a monster manual integrated into the rule book. We call it the Monster Codex, the legally distinct monster manual, of course. And unlike most tabletop RPGs that at least I'm aware of, both in-world and meta information about the enemies within that codex are canonically provided to the Monster Hunter characters in Hunters of the Occult. So more specifically, the monsters on the whole in this codex are divvied up into categories. So you have the undead category, you have the demon category, etc. And the idea is that the characters will specialize into one, potentially even more of those categories. So then not only does that character have some sort of small out of combat bonus when dealing with those monsters and those monster situations even outside of combat, but they will also have information regarding how to find the monsters, how to fight the monsters, some fluff about their place in the world, and that is embedded into the gameplay, or at least we highly recommend it should be, so that the players can kind of organically look through the codex and get a sense of the world building that we've created for this as well, all in one little system.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So it definitely will. You won't have to do that. Roll your D20, hit that DC, and then the GM imparts all the information. The players
Right.
have that before them, or have the opportunity to go study it out. I guess that'll, players who don't like homework, well, too bad, I think. But I love that kind of stuff. It really helps to me with the immersion and getting into the world and the system. And I think those types of things that, you kind of just recite what the stat block says after they make their DC 20 or whatever roll. That it can kind of break it. That gets more gamey, but this kind of, it seems to me it'd be kind of built into the system, right? So like, I know my character that I played was a doctor and had, I don't know if that was the exact class, but he had a knowledge of like demons, I think is that what he had. So
I think you're right.
I think it's pretty neat.
Yeah, like integrating that kind of having played D&D in the past, another dollar in the D&D jar. I know it's like every DM, it's every DM's nightmare to have the players go through the monster manual and say, oh, okay, so here's what we're fighting, here's what we need, here's the way to do it. And it's not generally how D&D is set up, at least to give players that intimate of meta knowledge, especially. But given that the characters in Hunters of the Occult are intended to be these career specialists in those monsters, it actually seemed fitting to say, no, you actually do, as a character, have a sense of what that meta knowledge is, and can therefore use it to your advantage, share it with your party members. We'd encourage also. But I think the one thing I really wanted to share here today was my personal favorite implementation of the system, which is using some of the world building information in the monster codex to create these mysteries of what is the monster that you're fighting, and trying to leave breadcrumbs in the adventure of, so you've run into these scratch marks, that people are missing, animals have been attacked. So putting together the pieces of this puzzle and having the players connect the dots with that monster codex knowledge has been extremely rewarding, and gotten great feedback on that system as well.
Cool. So Joshua, have you had a chance to play this?
Yeah, no, I've played it. It was a ton of fun. We played a mystery in a town that had a werewolf attacking it, and it was a ton of fun going through trying to piece together what was happening, where the story was going, what we could figure out on our own, and then what we didn't figure out, because I definitely know there's some stuff we didn't figure out that Stuart still teases that group about to this day.
That's cool. Well, but I think that sounds but you're able to complete. That's another about these investigative games. That's another sort of knock on these investigative type games like Call of Cthulhu, where if you don't find the clue, then the story is kind of it goes off the rails and you can't complete the story. But it seems like you were able to still complete the quote unquote mission, finish the story, even though you didn't get everything. Is that purposeful in the design, or would you say that, Stuart?
Oh yeah. Some of that, I will admit, is going to be mileage may vary based on the game master that is running the adventure. But I would definitely say one of the things that I have intended with a lot of the design, especially when it comes to, say, non-combat skills, is having multiple ways to skin a cat, and that you want to try to find the solutions that you guys as player characters would be good at. So if you're not a sneaky character, don't try to find a sneaky solution. And that's probably a lesson I've taken from some of the best RPGs anybody can name, especially things like your Fallout New Vegas and that sort of thing. And I've really appreciated those kinds of approaches in those RPGs. Wanted to make sure that the foundational pieces existed in the games that I design as well.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. So just to, is there anything else you want to talk about with regards to well, because we'll again repeat when it's coming. You know, you can repeat the Kickstarter. and stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I'd say maybe one or two other smaller things. I think those couple of things I mentioned are the biggest items that we're probably most happy with. But there are other functions that are kind of reinforcing the setting that we're going for that I think are worth mentioning. And so first is we wanted to make sure that we were adding some sort of tension to moments in gameplay outside of combat as well. I think one of the biggest weaknesses of D&D is that there are not enough mechanics that facilitate the role play outside of your going into the dungeon and fighting the bad guys. So we have introduced a system of psychological health, as you would see in potentially other games that try to approach, say, psychological horror. And so we have sanity to go alongside your health, and you as player characters are subject to sanity attacks as you go through, say, particularly stressful or horrific situations outside of combat. And at the same time, as you are subject to those sanity attacks, you may also become subject to psychological conditions, which we've called psychoses, which will inhibit and therefore add a bit of extra pressure to the out of combat gameplay that hopefully is a majority of what takes place in most campaigns. And so we've liked that as well, just trying to add some layer of intrigue and some sort of mechanical loop to play around, even when you're going through the investigation part versus the actual monster slaying part. And lastly, this is a minor thing, but we also kind of leaned into the perhaps mercenary aspect of what the monster hunters do. So in terms of character progression, there are classes in this game, but they're classes more in the sense of how, say, Elden Ring or the Dark Souls series approaches classes, where they're more starting points. But the idea is that as a character accomplishes tasks, they are gaining notoriety as they do so. So they are becoming more famous, at the same time canonically more wealthy, and therefore have the resources to dedicate themselves to pick up new skills, to pick up additional modifications for weapons, all sorts of different things. And we've left the character creation, or I should say the character building rather, pretty open as a point-buy system where you can just piecemeal every upgrade that you can think of across a wide array of different options, both combat and out of combat. And at the same time, as these characters are becoming more famous in the more traditional experience point way, we've also implemented a little role play system that we call reputation tags. So the idea is that as players are trying to go through adventures and they are engaging in different actions, as an example, we had one of our more muscly oriented characters who was a bit of an antagonist and liked to intimidate people. The game master of Hunters of the Occult will step in and say, okay, you've repeatedly intimidated suspects to try to get information out of them. You will gain the reputation tag of being intimidating. And the idea there is that future NPCs, according to the notes of whatever GM you have, should be noting this, and therefore the future NPCs should have heard of your intimidating antics before you've met them and treat you accordingly.
Well, that's
and
cool.
we've gotten some very fun ones out of there. Intimidation is probably one of the more common low-hanging fruit things, but we've gotten some wacky ones, and you can have a lot of fun with the different silly reputations that you can gain as players have discovered.
Great. Yeah, so it sounds pretty awesome. So this is Hunters of the Occult by Storeywood Games, coming to a Kickstarter near you, and you're thinking about August 1st launch. Is that correct?
Yeah, it will be launching August 1st for Zine Quest.
Oh, for a Zine Quest. Okay, so it's going to be like a zine style, or what do you think the format's going to be?
I mean, it's pretty sizable. I think we're kicking around how big we want to do it, but yeah, we're trying to do. We've only done zines thus far, so we're using a lot of the knowledge from that we've gained and trying to build on that. So I think you can still call it a zine. It's just a really big zine.
So what do you think is the page count's going to be?
I think we're saying around 120 right now.
120, something like that. Yeah, it's exactly what I'm thinking.
That's a thick, A5 size book to me, right? That's cool. Yeah. That's good. That's great. I'm looking forward to it. So it's gonna be like kind of, I guess some of my listeners would be familiar with like the OSE size style, right? That kind of yeah. So not like you're not doing like a big full size book, but like a more of a that size, right? Like
Yeah,
A5.
yeah, it's gonna be A5, I believe. Yeah.
That's really cool. All right, so yeah, so I'm getting some for me when you're talking about it, Stuart. I'm getting like some Penny Dreadful as well as Von Helsing, like Frankenstein and that series and that monster, those classic monsters. So like Hammer horror, which I think is great. And then with the dose of I love that sort of creation of your signature weapon, a la Vox Machina and Percy and his gun creation. So I think that's really appealing to a large percentage of the zeitgeist and the people that are probably going to be looking for this game. I think it's pretty cool. So Josh, you want to talk about your project?
Yeah. I'm working on 1886.
And what's the time frame for that? Or is that up in the air yet? Or is that like, can you give an estimate like at the end of this year, at the beginning of 2023, or what are you thinking?
My guess would be sometime this time next year, maybe would be the soonest you would see it.
Okay.
Because
So it's still like in its infancy, or
yeah, so we're doing this for the Augustine quest, and then we gotta get this finished and produced, and then I think we have a little under wraps project that Scott and I have been kicking around.
Ooh.
That we think would be fun to do for Zine Quest in February because they've moved it. They changed it this year only to August, and they're changing it back to February next year. So they're like, okay,
yeah,
well,
it's interesting. Yeah.
I'm glad they changed it personally. Gen Con managing a Kickstarter while it's happening is going to be kind of hard, I think, for a lot of creatives, and just distracting while you're trying to go to a con. So I think moving it back to February was a good call personally. So, but yeah, we're going to be launching something for there and for February of 2023. And so my guess is once we fulfill that, we'll hopefully have some more news about 1886 for you guys.
Great. So, but you can tell us about it because I know you have. I've looked through some of the rules and. I think the appeal is very cool, and that is one, Western, which I really love, and a lot of my listeners dig Westerns. And then two, it uses like a card deck mechanic.
Yeah, so like I said, it's a historical Western, and specifically historical. I put all the weird West ideas in a different book entirely that maybe someone will see one day, but it's
that's actually kind of cool. So the approach is like we'll do historical traditional West. And then maybe as a supplement, like a Weird West.
Yeah, that was kind of what my thinking. Yeah, because it's like I personally I love the Weird West stuff, but I always someone told me early on in the project. His name's Brian. He's a good friend of mine. He sent me down and said, "Hey Josh, I really like this project that you're working on. I think it's really cool. I think there's a gap that could be filled with a historical Western. We don't really have like a good historical Western that is like a modern." Game, I guess. I don't know. I haven't really seen too many, and so he was really telling me, he's like, there's a lot of weird Western out there, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but he was like, you should look at seeing how that would go. And so just playing around with it, I thought that it really fit the theme of the game. So like Carl was saying, you use cards to adjudicate the outcome, and you're kind of playing a little bit of blackjack while you're playing the game instead of rolling dice. So you flip two cards, and you're trying to hit a small little success window there. And it's really fun. It's really tense. Someone once told me that it was like every roll was like a nat 1 or a nat 20, and it was a roller coaster of emotions every time someone was making a flip. And I thought that for me that was really fun because I really wanted that in a game. It was really tense, and it was still grounded in history though. So that was like a really fun part of the project. So yeah, that's what I'm currently working on. 1886, a historical Western that uses blackjack instead of dice rolling mechanics.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, you were correct. There are a lot of Weird West, Weird Frontiers, Down Dark Trails, Deadlands. Those are the three that first come to, I guess. And then like the historical West were like games like Boot Hill, which hasn't been around for a while. So it's great that historic. So what kind of stories are you telling, or like if you have an adventure? Yeah, right. Because the Weird West stories I think are a little easier, right? Because you have the weird. And that's your like MacGuffin. But in a traditional West or historical West game, like are you like I can think of a lot of things, but I'd love for you to hear, like what are you proposing like for an adventure? What's your typical adventure?
I love a train heist. For me,
Oh,
that was
cool.
the original conception. It was always, you go out there, you're gonna rob a train. And the first time I ran it, I think I just, I made a bunch of tools and I was like, okay, you're gonna go into town. There's a bunch of tools in here. Go figure out what you're gonna need, and you're gonna rob this train. That was pretty much it. And it was because it was just kind of playtesting mechanics to see how it would feel, and everyone had a ton of fun. So that's always the classic go-to for me is the train heist. In fact, the one in the book that was written originally by Stuart here, he was the one who conceived of the story idea. It's the last train to Green Springs,
Mhm.
and so that's what we run mainly as like a little story adventure. But really, when you're looking at telling stories for a historical Western, you're really trying to draw out a lot of the interpersonal dynamics and conflicts, right? Because it's really easy to just say we solve everything with our guns out here, but that's not a fun story to run. I don't think personally, as someone who's run that story, it's just not that entertaining when everyone is always getting their guns. What's really fun though about the game is that it doesn't really facilitate that because there's not really health. There's not really this like combat versus non-combat role dynamic. Your flips are just your flips. That's what they are, and they kind of represent more so time you have and experience and things like that. And the idea is that as you progressively play your character, they'll get better in certain ways. They'll learn to do certain things better, but ultimately, it really comes down to this time mechanic that it represents their stats and everything. It's not this idea of combat versus non-combat situations. So you run a lot of, there's stories you could tell about someone's trapped in a mine, but there's also stories you could tell where maybe there's lost treasure in the mine and you're, trying to get it out with a group of people. Maybe they're going to try to betray you. That's a fun, just a quick dynamic where you can play with. There's a lot of tension in that situation and tons of ways to pull at it and kind of create tension for the players and get them to act. Because it's not, as a narrator is the role of the GM, is what we call it in 1886 is narrator. And they're not making any flips. They don't have a deck of cards. They're just telling players what's happening narratively and letting them react. And so, finding moments where you can get that human emotion and pulling at it is really what the game's about.
Cool. So can you give us like a rundown of like a basic character sheet and the mechanic? I know you mentioned this card flip, but then is it like, what's it based on? Do the characters have like a set of attributes and then they add the number on the card to their attribute and that's what you're looking for? Are you trying to actually hit 21 as playing blackjack, or how do conflict and the basic mechanic work?
Yeah, so taking a little bit from my Powered by the Apocalypse background, I really love the idea of complicated successes where you're able to do what you want, but maybe it comes at a cost. Maybe it comes at putting you in a bad opportunity. There's a lot of ways you can play with a complicated success. And so that was a big inspiration for me. And it started off as just 3 stats and it's evolved to be 5 stats now. And it's basically you're trying to hit more than 17. 17 is like the cutoff point. Anything 17 or less, that's a failure. Then you have a success window of 18 to 21, and that's where you have a success. And then anything above a 21, if you play blackjack, it's a bust. And when you bust, it's kind of like an auto loss when you're playing blackjack. So in the game, it represents narratively something happening that's much worse than just, you try something and you failed, right? If you got less than 17, it's kind of, a lot of times you call it low stakes is the mechanic specifically. It's like a low stakes situation maybe. So, you flipped and you failed. You elected to fail. You didn't want to hit it, right? Because you flipped 2 cards. You can hit and get another card if you want. So you elect to fail and you can not suffer so many consequences. But if you bust, there's a ton of consequences. So you're looking to kind of ride that lightning and hit that sweet spot. And it's really fun because so often someone will hit a 12, an 11, a 13, and they're like, oh,
Should they flip again? Yeah. Hit me. Huh.
So again, going back to that roller coaster of emotions. And it sounds like it's really complicated, but it's not. You're just flipping 2 cards, adding a number, then saying, did it hit 18 or did it bust? Pretty much.
Well, so thank you guys for talking about your games. Do you want to talk about anything more, the games that you're working on? Is there anything else you want to plug from Storeywood I think we had mentioned another non-work board game. I don't know if you want to talk about Junction City, or if you want to, actually, I have a question now.
Mhm.
So there's this big thing. So we'll talk about Morkborg specifically first. And there's always this, I would say, yes, I think Morkborg is very fun to play. It's a playable game. The core book is a beautiful work of art, but that's kind of been the knock on Morkborg, is it's an art house, and it's not a game that's meant to be played, but just to be read about. So as authors who and a company who's made some Morkborg products, what do you think?
I was having a conversation with my friend earlier today about the place of art as games. And I'll be honest, I buy a lot of games myself with no intention of ever running them, because I think the mechanics look cool, the design is awesome, the layout's great. I do not think Morkborg is one of those games. I think you'll see that proven true, because actually I think as of this week, they're now pay what you want for the base rules, the bare bones edition of Morkborg.
Right.
I think a ton of people just like it, because I think it's a streamlined game. It's super fun. It's super wacky. There is aesthetic in the artwork, sure, but I think the text really holds up. I think if you go and you read the bare bones edition, it's still dripping with that Morkborg feeling.
Right.
It's still there. I think that's a core part of the game personally.
Yeah, still has
Yeah,
that.
I was. Oh,
Go
sorry,
ahead,
go
Stuart. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add that Merkborg has kind of taken the TTRPG world by storm. I mean, just it's seemingly overnight, just everywhere. And I don't. I would say anybody criticizing the game as just a work of art to be put in a bookshelf is unfair. And I don't think you get to be that popular without some element of playability to it. And I think what Merkborg has done very well is had a very easy, digestible, and kind of just like silly fun premise that they're running with, and it's super easy to just get into it. You die at the end of the campaign and have a ton of laughs along the way, and that's the appeal. Is it's almost even marketed up front as just silly fun times with your friends. You can take it as seriously as you want. So I definitely think there's strong elements of playability that lend more merit to Merkborg than maybe some people give it credit for.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, I love the post-apocalyptic feel of it, and it does have a sense of pathetic aesthetic. I think that's the silliness that you might refer to, that in a way the heroes are stumbling, bumbling, but I think you can have heroic events happen in the game. I played it, and I felt that way. So I agree. It is definitely a playable game. I love that you kind of suggested, Stuart, that you played like a whole campaign. So you've gone through right there. Isn't there a point where the world just ends, right? And you've gone through that in a campaign.
In Morkborg, what happens is there's miseries. So and those are triggered. And the Psalms are the text, the holy text that predict what happens. So like our adventure, Psalms 4:1 is someone who's trying to accelerate by using one of the Psalms to speed up that apocalypse. So and when you fill up, when you get all the miseries or read all the Psalms, I guess the world ends, and that's when their campaign ends. But to kind of piggyback off of what Stuart was saying, I think a really important part of that, it's a lot of fun. And I think one of the coolest things about it is because there's no expectation of, because you come to the game with no expectations, your character is really moldable. And I think that's super interesting to see that people take these pretty bare bones character sheets, quote unquote, that you just get off a Scumberther. You can generate a character. I say bare bones. That's not what I mean. I mean like it's super simple. It's just generated. There's no not anything super complex on it. It's just a random pre-trained character, and people will run so many different directions with them. We have one friend who exclusively plays characters who will eventually die at some point because they know the apocalypse is coming. Aaron Stuart, as our mutual friends, he just always plays characters who just have no attachment to the world that they're in because they recognize the world is ending. And it's really interesting to see some of those characters that he plays in that. There's a lot of, if you role play it and you really, kind of embrace the role play of it, I think there's a lot to be seen at what kind of sits at the edge of the world.
So there you have it. It's definitely a playable game. I agree. I know there, unfortunately, guys, there's some of my listeners who think it is just an art book, but now they will hopefully be persuaded in the direction of playability. Let's have fun. I don't know. Beer and Pretzels gets a bad name, like a beer and pretzels game, but I think that's a good thing. And I think you guys just said that's the idea is to have fun in this type of game and not take it too seriously. Is that correct?
That's
Yeah,
probably what I would say. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know if I would use the phrase beer and pretzel specifically, but yeah, I think it's definitely like that kind of game where you can just sit down, play it, have fun, turn your brain off, or
Okay.
or turn your brain on, I guess.
Yeah,
if
I
you
think
want to,
unlike a Dungeons and Dragons or one of the more traditional games, Merkborg is one of the ones that you can very easily jump into quickly and casually with maybe not even a whole
casual.
lot of
That's a good.
setup. And
Mhm.
yeah, it can be as deep as you want. I will say until the cows come home. I think there is depth in Merkborg, especially with the world building they've done in the main rulebook, for people to go deeper if they really choose to, but you don't have to. You can opt into that level of depth if that's your speed. If not, you can have the beer and pretzels game. That's fun too.
Yeah,
Great.
great way of saying it.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about gaming, and I guess really sold me on your games. Like I said, I've already clicked notify me on launch for Hunters of the Occult. So what do you guys do outside of gaming? What do you do for fun? And then we'll wrap it up after we talk about our non-gaming hobbies.
Me personally, I've really been getting into the Gunpla, the building Gundam stuff lately. I used
Oh
to
yeah.
do years ago, and I got rid of all my stuff, and now I'm back in, and I've been having a ton of fun with it. They came out with these since then. They're called 30-minute missions, and they're a ton of fun. And it's a great activity. Just sit down, clip some sprues, draw some lines, trim some plastic, turn your brain off, and just relax.
So is it mail order? I feel like Dragon's Lair has a bunch
Yeah,
of them.
our local store, Dragon's Lair at the medical center, or Alma Ranch, both have Gundam kits. But you can go online. You can get them pretty much at any hobby store too. But you should support your local game store.
Nice. Good. Yeah, we'll plug Dragons there. I'll put a link in the show notes because, it's cool where we met, and they are right now that kind of COVID is. I hope at its tail end here. Things are opening up, and we get to play face to face again. So, Stuart, what about you?
Well, in my free time, I'm a bit of a musician, an amateur musician, so I play a couple of
Cool.
instruments. I've been playing guitar since high school, piano since college, that sort of thing, and I spend quite a bit of time just picking up my guitar in between game sessions, that sort of thing, and just strumming out a couple songs. But if I'm not playing music, I also have a couple dogs at home that are great, and I love playing with them. And we have one that's especially young. He's about a year old, and he loves to go outside and play fetch and go for walks. And so if I'm not playing video games or tabletop games, I am either playing an instrument or playing with my dog.
Great. So, what kind of music do you play?
Oh, all sorts of stuff. I would say my bread and butter is acoustic guitar, and I play everything under the sun, from Metallica to Leonard Skinner to
Nice.
country music, all sorts of different things.
I've always wanted to pick up the guitar and learn, and probably should have a long time ago. I'm definitely appreciate music. I love music. Metal. I'm a metalhead. Metal has kind of kept me going through a lot of my life. Back when we were nerds, or I was a nerd in high school. That was like being with the metal guys was kind of the safe space. So I definitely appreciate that you played Metallica. And
Sure,
Leonard
yeah.
Skinner.
Well, that's kind of the dirty little secret of the guitar world, and I'm sure a lot of people who, especially who instruct, will tell you this. But if you're ever learning guitar, anybody who's interested in learning guitar, one of the more satisfying pieces of work that you can learn, even for beginners, is Metallica songs. And so you pick up a couple intros to Fade to Black or One or anything like that, and it's actually fairly productive as a learning exercise, even more so than perhaps traditional pop songs or things like that. So yeah, I'm also very appreciative of the metal scene myself. Great people.
Yeah, I like all animals, but I'm a dog person more than Josh. Are you dogs or cats?
Oof, I was really hoping you would ask that because I'm definitely a cat guy. I say in the room currently with 3 cats.
Yeah, my wife is a cat person. She's actually a cat whisperer, but she also does that wag thing as a dog whisperer too. So like she's gotten like these hard cases where people are like, oh, no one can handle my dog, and she handles them. But she's great with animals. So I love animals a lot, and like I said, I lean more towards dog, though we too have lots of cats.
Yeah, we can be both. I have dogs now, but let me tell you, growing up, I think we had over a dozen cats between like the time of me being born and the time I went off for college. It was a lot of cats growing up, but yeah, I love them both, to be fair.
All right, well, guys, I think we'll close that out talking about cats and dogs and living together and all that. Do you guys have anything else you want to say? Maybe I think what would be cool is like how do our listeners contact you? Contact Storeywood Games. That'd be great if you could tell us how we can contact you, Josh, you, Stuart, if you would like, and anything else you want to say about Storeywood.
Yeah. So, Stuart, you mind if I go first?
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, so you can find Storywood pretty much anywhere on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram. The word specifically, though, is Storywood, STOREYWOOD. So you find us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Jib Jab, anywhere you can find a social media profile, you can probably find us there. And then you can check out Hunters of the Occult. It's coming August 1st on Kickstarter. And I think, Carl, you said you're going to put a link in the description for it.
Yeah, for sure. For the notification.
Yep. If you can go ahead and sign up now. It's our biggest project yet. Like we said, 120 pages right
awesome.
now. Yeah. So we're going to do all the help you can get on this project. So if you're interested in it, you want to check it out, we'd love to, love the support. Even if you're just sharing it, notify on launch. We appreciate any and all.
Yep, and I'll just mirror. Please find us on Kickstarter and all the social media platforms, Storywood Games and Hunters of the Occult, launching on Kickstarter August 1st. You can get the early notifications already, and you can find me, Stuart Wilding, on Instagram as wilding.stuart. Feel free to follow me and like the content as we're sharing it, as more and more details get released on the social media.
Great. Well, thank you guys for allowing me to sit down with you and talk about gaming and your projects and Storywood Games and clarify all the misconceptions about Merc Borg. And hopefully we'll get to talk again and play some more games together.
For sure. Thank you for having us on. It's been a huge blast. We really appreciate the support. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, happy to do it. Thank you very much for hosting us. It's been a lot of fun.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you, all my listeners, for hanging out with us here at the Geomology Presents, and happy gaming, and I'll talk to you soon.